Greetings, everyone. My name is Shawn Felton, coming to you from Ithaca, New York at Cornell University. I'm Director of Undergraduate Admissions, and I'm joined by two colleagues and two current Cornell University students, and we'd like to talk with you today a little bit about what it's like to be a first-generation college student. Thank you all for joining me. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, and why don't we start with our students. Katie, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm a freshman at Cornell University. I'm studying government and philosophy with a pre-law track, and I'm from East Tennessee.
And Christopher?
Hi, my name is Christopher. I'm a freshman at Dyson, and I live in near Queens.
So glad you guys are able to join. I know you're very busy. It's the end of the fall semester, so we appreciate the time. And then my two colleagues who work alongside me here at Cornell University, would you introduce yourselves? And we'll start with you, Shakima.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shakima Clency. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. And I serve as the Associate Dean of Students for Student Empowerment and Director of First Generation and Low Income Student Support. I oversee the Kessler Presidential Scholars Program, and I'm situated in the Dean of Students office.
Wonderful. And Alysa.
Alysa Orrantia Bieneme. I'm one of the Associate Directors of Admission in the Undergraduate Admissions Office at Cornell, where I work with Shawn. And I coordinate diversity outreach efforts for the university, as well as coordinating the Southeast regional recruitment efforts. And I am originally from Southern California and a first-generation college graduate myself.
That's right. So Christopher, you are a first-generation college student. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Katie, you're a first-generation college student. Is that correct?
I am.
Alysa is a first-generation college student, no longer a college student, works with college students now. Shakima, are you a first-generation college student? No longer
Yes.
a college student, working with college students. And I too am a first-generation college student. And I'm actually the first, I'm one of seven. Three of us went to college. I'm the first to go to a selective college away from home, as it were, far away. And so we might actually have Katie, especially you, because you're pretty far. You're from Memphis, Tennessee. We might have you talk a little bit about what that is like, sort of making that decision. But I first think we should talk about what does it mean to be a first-generation college student. And Christopher, why don't you start and talk a little bit about what that has meant for you in terms of your journey and getting to where you are today.
I feel like going to college, like first in my family, it means setting that path for not only for my little sister, but like to other students. I feel like first generation students fall into that trap where, because they don't have the prior connections or like the prior knowledge, that they have a less like probability of getting into like a selective school. But I feel like that's not really the case for most first gens. I feel like they have the as long as you have like the strive, the motivation, and to want to like to succeed, that's what I've been like keeping to myself and like pushing myself. So yeah, I feel like that's an attribute like that most first gen students have.
And Katie, what about you in terms of, what does it mean to you to be a first generation college student?
Well, being first gen, especially during the college application process, I learned that applying to college is not one size fits all in the slightest, because I would talk to my friends and my peers and they'd tell me how much their parents were helping them, or all of these resources that they had that I had absolutely no clue even existed. And so while my parents were very helpful in the process, there was definitely that disconnect where I had to learn to advocate for myself in the process versus utilizing all of the resources around me. So it definitely, like Christopher said, led into that sense of drive and that sense of personal responsibility that I wanted to take with me to an elite institution.
Katie and Christopher, thank you guys so much for talking about that. I want to dig a little bit into what you both have said and ask either of you, and Katie, we'll start with you. were there times where you felt that it was insurmountable, or maybe where you wanted to give up, where you thought maybe it's not worth the struggle and the challenge of doing this? I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, so definitely during last year's round of college applications, there was a lot of stress, especially because, I mean, in my case, I applied to a bunch of schools. I applied to 12 schools, which is not usually what people do. People my age around here only applied to like maybe 3 or 4 schools that were very close to home. Applying to an Ivy in New York was definitely an outlier in that sense. So I just always had these big dreams and I really wanted to push myself. So that being said, I just had to develop the sense of drive and push myself beyond that stress, beyond those limitations. On top of being a senior in high school, doing all of my extracurriculars and feeling like I was at times the only one in my own corner. I knew that the only way to get out of that corner was to push myself beyond those limitations.
That's interesting. And Christopher, what about you? I mean, you're from New York City. There are a lot of people in New York City, and one might assume that, certainly there was support there, there were resources there that you could have accessed, but talk about how that might have been challenging.
I graduated from like a somewhat like competitive high school. And so especially I didn't get in for the early decision where I ED to Cornell, but I saw that a lot of students got into their early action schools. So that somewhat like demotivated me. But I honestly think that it's like a double-edged sword. Coming from a competitive school, it kind of like pushes me down, saying that, oh, I'm not good enough. But at the same time, it always like pushes me and it fuels me to like be as like work as hard as them. So I feel like like coming from a competitive school, like it's like there's like benefits and like disadvantages, and I feel like because like of what I gained from it and who the people I surrounded myself with, I think I did like pretty well.
You absolutely did very well. So both of you did. Shakima and Alysa, so you guys are both first generation college students, not recent college students, but this experience as well. It probably happened a little bit differently for you, but if you wouldn't mind, I'd be curious to have you add to what the students said, and if you could think back and talk about the challenges that you might have experienced applying to the schools that you both attended, which were both not close to home, if I recall correctly, for both of you. And, you were both applying to schools like Katie and Christopher did, that were sort of schools that you probably, you felt like you were reaching up and you were trying to sort of go someplace that was going to be tough and help you advance, and that wasn't right around the corner. So, Shakima, we'll start with you. What was your experience?
Right. So when I was applying to school, I have to admit, the term first gen was unfamiliar to me. It wasn't something that was talked about as it is today. So I think that was one limitation. So not even having the language to explain the experiences that I was going through. I made the decision to attend. I was born and raised in New York City, and decided to go to a small private university, which was 8 hours from New York City, right? So definitely far from home, and surrounding myself in an environment that was academically rigorous, that also allowed me to navigate with people who came from very different backgrounds than I did. Just getting used to that type of environment did require some resiliency. And there were moments where I struggled with imposter syndrome, sort of as what Christopher alluded to, as I was applying to schools, and some of my peers were getting admitted to their top choice institutions. And I was waiting, right? I didn't apply early decision or early action. I applied regular decision. So I had to wait until February, March to receive my notification. And as I watched other folks get admitted, when I finally received my offer letter to my first choice institution, I also applied to about 7 institutions, but my first choice was my first choice and I was admitted to that institution. So that was extremely exciting for me during that time. I think the other thing that I grappled with was the finances, and trying to explore how can I make this a reality for myself, recognizing that I didn't come from a family in which my parents attended college. And so those numbers were quite large, right? And so trying to figure out how to make this work and make this investment in myself was extremely important for me. That motivated me throughout the process.
That's really interesting. And Alysa, what about you? I mean, you're our West Coast person in some sense, and you came, I think you came east for school, all the way east, like 3 time zones. You were fearless, apparently.
I think it came to a point where it was like all or nothing. It was like, I'm going to go for this. I'm going to do this. So many people are telling me no. The obstacles are telling me no. It's been so challenging. I went to a high school of 3,000 students. I was like my own college counselor. I joke that there were angels along the way. So, I mean, okay, let me backtrack a little bit. You know, as a first-gen student, I didn't know, similar to Shakima, what that meant. My parents actually attended and dropped out for multiple reasons, financial and tragic things. And so they valued education and they pushed, but when it came to the college process and the options, it stopped there. And I was basically on my own. So it's a little bit different. I'm not necessarily the traditional first-gen student who's without, any support or resources. My parents did encourage, and first-gen parents are encouraging on the most part, but many times lack the capital, the knowledge to guide us. So that was really me in very much sense. So I would go to the public library and get help from a retired engineer to study for the ACT. He was one of those angels along the way, but there were just so many obstacles. So I just realized I had always wanted to be more challenged and be in this kind of quintessential, what I felt like brick and ivy, just a very different environment, different seasons, people from all over the world. And I mean, it felt like a steep climb, like to get there. And I did, but then we know once we get there, through the financial barriers, through the preparatory barriers, the actual application process, which is confusing sometimes for just anyone. And then you add to it feeling like you're almost like from another world. Like, whoa, I don't understand this process. The common application, I didn't trust it. I thought, what is this? No, I have to do every single one of these 10 applications, similar to Katie. I'm going to do this because otherwise the admission offices won't think I really care. Or, I thought that I had all these misconceptions and I made more work for myself. But I think more importantly, once you get there, utilizing the resources is really important. And we don't always know who those people are, where, and it seems like at times everyone else gets it and we don't. That's how I felt. I felt like everyone else got it and I didn't. And so there were people that probably could have been more helpful to me that I just did not seek out. And also, similar kind of Shakima was mentioning, several years ago, first gen wasn't talked about as much, or if it was more even kind of taboo. You just kind of, I know for me, I don't want to generalize, wanted to be more under the radar because it was that imposter syndrome. Even in the classroom, there were people that, had been to the best schools in the nation, like who had the greatest resources. And this was like old hat to them. Whereas I was just constantly having to figure out what was going on. But I don't regret it. And I look back now and I see it's those challenges that we overcome that make the success that much sweeter. But that's not to say I wouldn't have done things differently had I known there were resources available.
That's really, really valuable, all of that to hear. Katie and Christopher, tell me a little bit about the support system you had as you were making the decision to apply to college and the support system you had at home, parents, guardians, or maybe people you knew who were part of, an extended family, friends who were family. And if there were counselors at your school who had the time to give to you or who didn't, just in terms of your sort of moving through this process as a first generation college student. Christopher, we'll start with you.
Someone who helped me a lot and go through the process was it was my physics teacher. I don't know. He really although he didn't do like the financials and everything, or like talk about, I kind of talked about like what I wanted to write about with him, and I felt like the connection I had with him was like very like intimate, and like it was fun like talking to him, and I got like ideas from him also. I also feel like it's like I had that drive from like my friends and my parents. I don't know, like seeing my parents go to work, it just like makes it it helps me like get up in the morning. So like my dad goes to work in the morning, and he drops me off on the way to school, to like a subway station. And so I don't know, just seeing him like have that like composure, like always smiling in the morning, saying like goodbye, Chris. Like it just motivates me to like do the work, to pump out all the essays, to like keep do my extracurriculars, to play sports after school. And with my friends also, I feel like you become the person you surround yourself with. And my all my friends are motivated. They made sure that they kept to their courseworks, and I feel like me wanting to be like them and them wanting to be like me, we just all helped each other get into the college that we wanted to.
That's really interesting. And I also agree, you become like the people who you're around. What about you, Katie? What about support? Who was there for you? Who was motivating you, pushing you, in any of the various ways that were helpful to you?
Yeah, so I think my biggest sense of support was from the people who understood my situation the absolute most, which would be my siblings, because they were in a very, very similar situation as I was. So I have two older brothers who are about 15 years older than me, huge age gap there. So they have taken on kind of like a mentor position in my life. And then my biggest sense of support, who was my rock throughout the entire process, was my older sister, who is just over a year older than me. So me and her grew up pretty much in tandem, and she went to a school that was closer to home, but she knew that I always had these really big dreams and grand aspirations to go out and do more with my life. And she was so helpful in staying on me about deadlines, pushing me to pursue essays whenever I got dejected and said, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm just being idealistic. Maybe this is just a dream and that's all it is. But she was always there. She was always pushing me to stay motivated, because she is one of the smartest and most inspirational people I know. So when she was there pushing me, it just really kept me on track for the goals that I wanted to set for my future self. And beyond that, like Chris, my friends were so supportive throughout the entire thing. My best friends were constantly pushing me, just like my sister, even though they weren't having any plans to go off far away from home. They were always like, Katie, this is what you want. This is what you've always wanted. So you need to go out and pursue that. And the only way to do that is to do it for yourself.
It's so interesting to hear all of you talk about this moment, which is a difficult moment. It's an exciting moment, but it is a very challenging moment. It's an emotional moment. We've even talked about the emotions that might sort of be at play during this time, this process. We talked about the support, and the one thing I've heard is that this going to college was a dream for a lot of us, and it wasn't a certainty, and there may not have been individuals around who could tell us exactly what we needed to do, and who would be making sure that we were doing exactly what we needed to do at the times we needed to do it. And that actually does make the process a little bit more challenging for a lot of first generation students who are thinking about going to college. And so, Alysa, I want to start with you, but I think we can go around and ask everybody this question. But what would you recommend first generation college students take advantage of and seek out when they're starting and moving through the college search? So at the very beginning, Katie and Christopher have conquered this process, and congratulations to both of you for getting to where you are, because, you have realized those dreams. But in terms of, what would have been helpful, what could be helpful, Alysa, any sort of things to recommend to students that who also may be first generation and maybe sort of feeling and thinking, a lot of the same things and have had similar experiences that we've all discussed?
Yeah, so first things first, I would start with self-reflection. I think that, well, for me personally, I had dreams, but then in the middle of the obstacles, it became more of I just have to do this because I really need to grow and I need to leave home and I need to go to college. And it became more about just kind of that checklist at some points. And when you operate that way, you kind of deprive yourself of really fulfilling your full potential at times, because you might then try to fit into the mold of, well, I guess this college might work for me, versus what's the best possible fit for me and what do I really feel like I want to achieve in college. So that, I think, is at the forefront, that should be at the forefront of the college search. Really jot it down, self-reflect on maybe even the skills and the types of things you want to, areas you want to grow in college, types of experiences you want to have, not just the major or future career. And then I think that can really help guide your process, because there are so many options out there and it can be even more confusing if you don't have that compass. And then beyond that, I would say just know that you're not alone. And there are many, many resources. If they're not available in your high school, for instance, my high school had a career center, but it didn't have a college center. It didn't have a college going culture. Out of a class of like almost 600 seniors, I was one of maybe a couple dozen that went to a 4-year school, and one of 4 that went out of state, one of 2 that went to a selective private school, went to an Ivy and went to a small Ivy. So there was just not a lot of resources. So I would say just know you may have to go outside of your school into your community, even online. There's virtual advising. There's a great organization called College Greenlight with free resources. There are scholars programs, the LEADA Scholars. There's Upward Bound programs. That's a federally funded program where they'll take you on college tours. They'll give you advice. So just don't think that you have to do this alone. And you're going to see you're going to really go far. You're going to go far no matter what. But with those resources, it's going to just be a little bit simpler than it doesn't need to be so difficult. So.
Thank you so much, Alysa. And Shakima, it's interesting, you work very closely with the admissions office, and you often provide us leads and information on students to follow up with, and a lot of whom you actually follow up with yourself, who are sort of in the same sort of moment where they are first generation or they're less familiar with college, and they've gotten to the office of the dean of students, and they've gotten to you as the associate dean in that office. So I'm curious, what might you have to sort of recommend in terms of students taking advantage of things and seeking out individuals like yourself? I mean, if that's something you would recommend when they're starting this process out.
I think it's extremely important to really use the college search process to learn more about yourself and to get a sense of what are the type of experiences, what are the resources, and what are the opportunities available at each institution that you're considering, right? That can help you develop into the person that you want to become and have the experiences that you want. And so I think it's very beneficial to take the time to make connections with some folks at the institution that you're considering applying to get to know more about and ask questions about the student experience. If there's an opportunity to talk to current students, I think that's extremely valuable. If you identify as a person of color or come from a marginalized background, I also think it's important to sort of identify those identity-based resources that can help you find community and get connected to folks like yourself. I know more and more institutions have residential communities that allow students to live and learn with other people who share a similar identity as them. And so that's a great resource to learn more about. But definitely as you're going through the process, and although it may be unfamiliar, although it may be cumbersome at times, I find students who are eager and open to asking for help and asking questions benefit the most from those experiences, because you're able to learn more. And it's a great way in which you can help demystify the whole college search process, right? And so I'm someone, whenever a student reaches out to me, I'm willing to now hop on a Zoom call, I have a phone call, and just talk with them. And for me, it's not about only recruiting them to come to this institution, right? It's about helping them navigate the college search process as a whole, because ultimately they're going to make the choice of where they want to go. And hopefully they'll have a number of institutions to choose from, and they'll select the one that's the best fit for them.
Thank you. That was amazing. I was just thinking as you were talking, like, this is all the stuff that Alysa and I say when we're doing programs, normally when we're someplace else other than our homes, which is where we're working from now. This actually might be a good time to talk about a program that we have, an opportunity that we have at Cornell University that we're extraordinarily fortunate and lucky to have. And it's the Kessler Scholars Program. And Christopher and Katie are a part of that organization, and Shakima is the lead for that here at Cornell. And Shakima, would you talk a little bit about the Kessler Scholars and the program, and what's happening and what it means for students who are coming to Cornell who are first generation?
Right. I think it's a wonderful, close-knit community that allows students who identify as first gen, one, to find a sense of community with other first gen students, but then also to be surrounded by students who are highly self-motivated, who have very ambitious goals, and then also who can benefit from peer mentoring, wraparound support, and then those opportunities, one, to make the Cornell experience a little bit more financially affordable, but then also to think about ways in which they can expand and build their network through professional development opportunities, through workshops, and even through experiences where they have to explore who they are and who they want to become. And so this is our second year having the program. Both Katie and Christopher are two of the 20 scholars who are in their first year at the institution. And the donors who provided the support for this program really want to help invest in this next generation of college students, right? And recognizing the potential that first gen students bring with them to the college environment, and recognizing although they may have had limited access to the type of resources that students from more affluent or privileged backgrounds can benefit from, these students have the potential to excel and do wonderful things and be highly engaged in the college environment and contribute in so many ways. And so just to have this program and to be able to lead this program is definitely a professional achievement of mine. And I think wholeheartedly, if I had this type of support when I was in college, it would have made my college experience a little bit easier to navigate.
Exactly. And I do think we are truly lucky to have the program, and it does allow us to attract students who haven't had the extraordinary access to resources and support in sort of making their way to college, but who certainly want to be here and who have been making themselves ready to be at a place like Cornell. And so we're lucky to have the program, and lucky to have students like Katie and Christopher join us and be a part of the Kessler program. And there's more information about the Kessler Scholars Program on the website, the Office of the Dean of Students website, Shakima's website, and we'll be adding some information about the program to the admissions office website, and more information on the admissions office website for first generation college students. But I do want to go back to Katie and Christopher and just ask you guys a question. So you heard we talked a lot about, your experiences, and we also talked a lot about how things changed over time between when Shakima and Alysa were looking at schools, and perhaps we also got a lot of details about what it's like and going through this moment, and how it's different for different individuals depending upon where you live, how much or how little your family, your parents can be involved, and the support you may or may not have. And so there are a lot of variables, and we want to make sure that students feel empowered, that there are opportunities and resources in spite of the variables and the uncertainty with being a first generation college student. I feel like Shakima really sort of set that sort of set that out there for us. But I do want to ask Katie and Christopher, if you had to do this all over again, what resources and support, on the way to Cornell, if you had to do this again, what resources and support would you take advantage of, or what resources and support do you wish you had known about when starting, earlier on in this journey? And we'll start with Katie.
So if I were to do all of this over again, well, I mean, just to start out, I'm incredibly fortunate to be where I am today. But if there was one thing I could change, I wish there was a way that I could have been more aware of how to establish those more interpersonal relations with the institution that I was trying to apply to. Because I often felt at sort of a disadvantage because I didn't have any kind of in that I could, even ask questions to or get a letter of recommendation. Whereas a lot of my peers now, I know that they did have those kinds of resources. And I, as a first generation student, often didn't even know that those resources existed. So even, and being from far away, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, which is about 15 hours away by car. So it's a long way from home. And I didn't have the resources to tour Cornell or ever have that kind of face-to-face interaction. So, and that's to say any other school that I applied to that was far away out of state. Just having those interpersonal relations and getting to connect with someone on a personal level brings a whole new level of, it brings another level of competitiveness to your application when you are applying to those kinds of elite schools.
Absolutely agree with all of that. What about you, Christopher?
As for me, I can't really pinpoint like a specific program that I didn't get to or something that I didn't know. But what I do know is that I would say I lacked like the necessary information for applying to colleges, like especially in the beginning of the process. I feel like if I had later on the process, I reached out to the upperclassmen and current students who were at these specific colleges, and I feel like if I had known that, if I had resources to contact them, to even have that contact, I feel like I would have been in a better position. Because I remember in the beginning, I had no idea what I was doing. I was writing, I was just answering the questions, but I felt like this isn't saying what I actually am, and telling these colleges what I actually want to be. And yeah, I feel like that's something I would have changed prior.
Yeah, it's an interesting question to look back. I'm a first generation college student, and my mother, when this was all happening and she dropped me off, she said, "I don't know anything about this." And she had said that to me several times, even when I was applying. She's like, "You're on your own. I don't know anything about this." But when she dropped me off, she said, "However, I did talk to two ladies in the financial aid office because at some point I thought you might need some help." And I still know their names to this day, and we're talking 30 years ago. Marilyn DeBerry and Lindy Mayo at where I attended undergraduate. And that was the most that she could do for me. But that was the most that she has done for me. And because I actually needed to go and see both of the staff members in the financial aid office within the first few weeks of school. And so I'm curious, before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about financial aid for just a few moments and just sort of hear from Katie and Christopher, if you don't mind. What was that process like? You must have been overwhelmed. Who helped you? And if you have any advice about that for others that might be walking through the complexities of the financial aid process on the way to applying. Christopher, we'll start with you.
Oh man, just thinking about it, my advice is just take your time. Don't do it to the last minute. I remember I was just like putting in numbers, and like with my mom besides me, and we're just like looking at each other like all like stressed out. So don't do that. I know a lot of my friends did that also, and especially at a time where you have to write and you want to like give out your best work, and you have to take all these tests, these homeworks, works, academics, extracurriculars. Like, don't put it at the last minute. The college process, it's designed to like test your abilities, but it's also like tests like your time management.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you have to, Christopher, did you have to engage your parents in the financial aid process when you were going through it? What was that like?
It was tough. I don't know. It was, I don't know, just like the process of like talking to them about like financials. It's just a weird topic because I'm usually talking about them like, oh, what are we eating for breakfast? Like where are we going? It's just, yeah, it's just really tough. I honestly think that it's there's somewhat of like a language barrier also. My parents are very fluent in Korean, and they can speak English as well. But like, I feel like having that like somewhat of a barrier just makes it like harder to like communicate with each other, especially when it comes to like a topic in like financials that I myself like am not very like experienced in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Katie, what about you?
When it came to financials, I had absolutely no clue going into it. I remember I was like, what's a FAFSA? My friends didn't know how to do it. Everybody was pretty much in the same boat because I attended a less competitive high school with a pretty low socioeconomic background. So everybody was kind of in the same boat in that regard. So we were all navigating the process in the dark. But me being first gen, my parents, they had somewhat of an idea just because I had older siblings who did go to college, and they were probably my biggest help in navigating the whole process. But like Chris said, like there was me and my dad sitting there looking at each other like, do you know how to fill this out? Because I am lost. But yeah, so my advice would be just don't be afraid to ask questions, because somebody out there is going to have the answer that you're looking for. You just have to don't be afraid to be vulnerable, because I know with questions of financials and socioeconomic background, it can be a little bit embarrassing to talk about with people because you think that other people won't understand. And to a degree, they won't. But you have to be able to put yourself out there. Otherwise, you're limiting yourself beyond the limitations that are already in place. So to that degree, you have to be your own advocate. And financials are so important because they will be, for me at least, they were the make or break of, even if I got into my dream school, could I actually go? You would have to have that. You have to mitigate that barrier before you can make your dreams come true.
That's really interesting, and really, I'm glad both of you shared that, because I do think that is an area that, again, it's the difficult area, and again, this process, admissions and financial aid, is complex. And then when we add in our parents who have not gone to college, who may not have English as a first language, and who just may not get any of this, it's that much harder for us as applicants, as students, as interested college students, students who want to go to college. Alysa, would you mind talking a little bit about, this is about the work that you do, but also just what undergraduate admissions resources might be available, are available that students, first generation college students, and others, again, from marginalized backgrounds, may not be aware of. What are some of those resources? And specifically, you can talk about broadly, because I know you know a lot about this topic, but also at Cornell.
Yeah, so more broadly, I think that when you are navigating this process on your own, you don't need to only count on the potential resources at the particular schools that you're looking at. And I'm going to explain that a little bit. So in your city or your area, or even online, for instance, sometimes there are application workshops, financial aid workshops, how to complete the free application for federal student aid. And they may be led by universities, colleges, or organizations that you're not as familiar with. And you wouldn't necessarily be pressured to apply to those particular places. They're more just resources for you to avail yourself of. And so similarly, in our office, undergraduate admissions at Cornell, we have a great team doing outreach. And similar to what Shakima shared earlier, we're really not as focused on, you have to come to Cornell, you need to look at Cornell. That's not what it's about. It's let's share about Cornell because it's an extraordinary place, but let's also share information. And we love that. We love to serve as a resource. So some of those workshops and opportunities are, a common application workshop, strategies for your success, financial aid workshops, essay writing, workshops and others. Typically, we would have done these things in person in different areas, different high schools, but we're doing more and more virtually, which is actually in a way a blessing. We're reaching more students in need. And then, of course, we also partner with organizations that help students virtually and also in person. There's really a lot out there. I think trying to find the information and the opportunities can be challenging, but we know that your generation is super savvy with research and you communicate with one another. If you know someone whose cousin went to such and such place, maybe you can get some information about that school or an event they're having. And so on and so forth. If you're visiting family in another city, even if you're not interested in attending college in that city, if and when, the campus is reopened to offer tours, just take a tour, explore a college or university, even if it's completely off your radar or it's much larger than you might want or much smaller than you might want, because having that exposure will help you in knowing kind of what you like, what you don't like, and so on. And then, the other thing is resources online, like I mentioned, College Greenlight and other organizations that are nonprofit organizations. They don't have an interest in you attending a particular school. They just want to get information out there. When you do a search online, you'll find those resources and you'll see that they offer a lot of different events or just free advising and so on. So don't, once again, think that you're on your own, because you do have resources that you may not even be aware of yet, and they'll help you a lot.
Yeah, I think about the fact that cell phones are now everywhere, a thing. They weren't a thing when I was applying to school. I couldn't just do a search, and I couldn't ask Siri or any of these other fabulous people that sort of talk to us from our phones and personal devices. Couldn't ask them to look something up for me. So we used to be place bound, and now there is greater access to information, and it's really important. I always like to hear what Shakima has to say, because she talks all the time about empowering students, and I think we have to empower students all the time and remind them about the opportunities, the access, the support, the systems that are in place that will help them. Because all systems are not built to help all students, unfortunately. And so, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Katie, you mentioned this before, that, Cornell and every other college must continue to find better ways to communicate with students that don't have access to us, the presumed access, the assumed access, the easy access, the sort of usual access. Those are the ways that we might even think about it. There are lots of students that we would like to know about us, and who would also like to know about us, and about whom we would like to know, that we're not necessarily connecting with. And so we've got a lot of work to do. I'm curious, Katie and Christopher, if you wouldn't mind talking about some of the challenges that you've experienced as Cornell students, as college students, and college students who are attending Cornell University. Christopher, why don't we start with you?
It's kind of funny how I mentioned that there's a few on Drive, but I feel like because everything's virtual right now, it just makes me love naps a lot. Although I get my work done, I'm usually used to doing extra work and working on myself or reading books, but I kind of find it hard to stick to a strict schedule.
Okay, because there's a lot to do. It's a very dynamic experience, and added to that is the pandemic sort of experience, which has changed, how college has happened this fall, and likely will sort of create a changed university experience for a lot of students into the immediate future. What about you, Katie? What have been some of the challenges you've experienced in, as a Cornell student and as a college student?
Yeah, at Cornell, I mean, at a lot of colleges, there's this drive to do everything once you get there. You get to school, you see that there's a million different organizations you can join. At Cornell, there's so many classes to pick from. It's a wealth of opportunity and it's fantastic, but there is a culture of overachievers at Cornell, and I'm admittedly one of them. So I definitely tried to throw myself into everything I could possibly try to do. And that was definitely the source of a lot of burnout that occurred, middle of the semester. And especially with everything being online, like Chris said, that burnout came a little bit earlier this year, and it hit a lot harder because being virtual and being online and not getting that sense of interpersonal connection and feeling like you're actually learning something and doing something really transformative for yourself and for the world around you, it can contribute to that sense of burnout.
That's really interesting. And I want to go to Shakima now and ask Shakima, what challenges have you noticed your first generation college students enduring at Cornell? And also, if you wouldn't mind talking about some of the other support services and resources available, in addition to the Kessler Scholars Program, a number of which you actually oversee, that are available to help students with enduring the Cornell, the selective university, rigorous college experience.
I think all students, regardless if they identify as first gen or not, go through this transitional period where they're making the adjustment from a high school student to a college student. In the college environment, there's a great deal of independence and autonomy, and getting used to that and trying to determine, as Chris talked about, how do you manage your time? As Katie mentioned, how do you explore what opportunities to be involved in? How do you make those decisions, right? So I think that's a huge adjustment for all students. First-gen students may experience it earlier or more intensified as a result of also learning to navigate a completely new place that has new terminology and office functions that may be unfamiliar to you, and unspoken expectations, right? And so trying to understand the cultural norms and try to understand the traditions and the ways in which people interact, and what I call the hidden curriculum of higher education, right? So trying to understand all of those nuances that may not be as explicit and easy to navigate. And so particularly in this virtual space, I find, and I serve as the advisor to our first generation student union organization, and we talk about the subtle messages that you receive as you're standing in line, going to grab dinner, or as you're waiting for a professor that you want to talk to as you're waiting for class to end, and how you learn some of those processes and procedures and even the cultural norms by observing other people, right? And that's something that I think a lot of students feel as though they're missing out on in this virtual space. And so really trying to be creative to get insight from upperclassmen to learn. I know we have a Reddit. I know there's a class of 2023, class of 24, class of 25, group me, right? And so students are constantly sharing information with each other and asking questions. And I think that's such a powerful tool that is also very empowering for students to be able to, one, ask a question, but then also to give advice and feedback to help someone else navigate something that they've had to overcome. So I think those are some of the challenges that first gen students face. When I think about the resources that are available at Cornell, in the Dean of Students office, and of course, I'll speak fondly of my space. So I work with a great bunch of colleagues who oversee our Asian and Asian American Resource Center, our Women's Resource Center, the LGBT Resource Center. And so thinking about students who identify with those communities and trying to find ways to get connected with people who share similar identities. I oversee first generation low income student support and also supervise staff who work with our undocumented DACA student population, as well as students who are eager to get involved in multicultural student organizations and develop as leaders across campus. And then the final area that I'll talk about is the Office of Spirituality and Meaning Making, which at Cornell doesn't necessarily mean you identify with a particular religious group, but more so you're someone who may be interested in learning more about your spirituality in trying to make sense of this college experience. And so thinking about meaning, making, purpose, I find it to be very empowering for students. And my colleague has shared just this year alone, they've seen an increase in the number of students who tend to seek out those resources, because I think a lot of folks are just trying to make meaning of their experiences. Also, within each college and school, there's a career services office. Definitely would encourage students to get involved and connected with those resources in your first year. Don't wait until your junior year. Don't wait until your senior year. Get connected in your first year to start to learn more about your career interests, your career attributes that you bring with you, as well as opportunities for internships or to connect with alumni or to do networking. And so getting involved in career services early on is extremely important and extremely valuable. And then also within each college or school, I think it's extremely important to build relationships with your faculty members. There should be 2 or 3 faculty members who you would feel comfortable going to ask to write a letter of recommendation, or you want to talk to about being on their research team because you want to be engaged in undergraduate research. And then also thinking about building a network that includes folks who have different identities and different experiences as yourself, who can also help you learn more about yourself and connect you to different resources and opportunities. So those are just a couple of the resources that are available at Cornell. I think regardless of what your interests are and what your need is, you'll find that there are a plethora of resources and opportunities and experiences that you can participate in. It's ultimately up to the student to make those choices, but we do a really good job of trying to help connect students to those resources.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate the fact that you mentioned, and I hope everyone heard that, first generation college students are really not all that different from all other college students.
Right.
The concerns, the needs, there's so much overlap, and there are tremendous resources at the university that, should be being utilized. And so I appreciate you mentioning all of those and the advice you gave. And as we wrap up, Alysa, any sort of advice, words of encouragement that you would like to leave first generation college students and others who might be watching this?
I just want to encourage the students that are watching, be it that you're first generation or maybe you're from another background where you may feel like you don't have support or you don't know how to navigate this process and kind of pursuing your goals and dreams for the future. You are not alone. You are not alone. There are tons of resources available to you. Reach out to us if you'd like. And just, I can't encourage you enough to continue to dream. I know we're living in times that are challenging, but as you do that self-reflection and think about what it is that you bring to the table, in terms of the college community, because you do.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't only about what Cornell or your future college or university can do for you, but you would be adding to the community. And sometimes it can be challenging for us to really grasp that and think that there's something unique or special that we bring. But the reality, and I remind everyone of this, there's no one else exactly like you with the exact same experiences and ways of seeing the world and the same goals and dreams as you. And so pour that into your application, be yourself, and reach out as you need help, both in the application process and also in the transition. I think that's something sometimes that sideswipes us as people, whether we're first gen or not, when we're making a transition into college or into a new job or whatever it may be. There's a period of transition and it can be challenging. And as both Shakima and Shawn have mentioned, you're not alone just because you're first gen. Everyone in that incoming freshman or first year class, will be navigating some of the same challenges. And the great thing is you can ask questions and be connected to resources, but you have to ask. So ask the question.
That's great advice. And Christopher and Katie, I'm going to give you guys the last words. And Christopher, we will start with you. Any advice for students, who might be in your shoes with your same questions and concerns, looking at going to college at Cornell or otherwise? Any advice, Christopher?
Do not slack off. Don't fall in the trap of senioritis. Make sure you start off strong and you end strong. You'll be more happier of where you end up, and regardless of where you do, just know that the college picks out the students based on how fit you are, and no matter where you end up in, you should be happy and proud of yourself.
That's really terrific. And Katie, you really do have the last word. Any advice to share?
Well, not just for first generation students, but just college students, well, not college students, but students who are applying to college in general. You have to be your own best advocate, because if you can't overcome those limitations, then you are your own biggest obstacle. And that's something that I really struggled with coming to terms with when I was applying to schools. I was always, whenever I got stressed out or whenever I decided maybe this isn't worth it, I had to push beyond those limitations. And that's something that a lot of students don't realize that they can do. They don't realize that they have to fit a certain mold. They think that if I was born and raised here, then I should stay here. Or everything that the world reflects back on you, you don't have to buy into it. You can go and you can do whatever it is you want to do. It's not simple, but you can make it more simple by giving yourself that kind of leeway to make those dreams come true.
That is amazing. And with that, I want to thank you all for joining me for this really important conversation that we hope will inspire and help students of all kinds, of all sorts, from all backgrounds, looking at going to college, and especially our first generation college students. We're wishing all of you good luck. And again, thank you, Shakima, Alysa, Katie, and Christopher, for this really, I think, just deep and helpful conversation, and appreciate all the guidance and information that you all provided.